Hey, what's up everyone? I'm a lost night owl, but please, call me Mel. Today we're talking about discernment. So let's light a candle and go. To paraphrase dictionary definitions, discernment is the ability to judge well, but it is also the quality to understand the obscure. It does have a biblical context, but we're not going to go over that today. The reason I'm talking about discernment is when one struggles with intention, discernment can sometimes help you find the answer. It's not the main answer, but sometimes you need a little help. Today we're focusing on the general spiritual definition, how I have used it in my own practice, and because it varies from practitioner to practitioner, I am opening up the tag discerning witches, just so I can get some opinions on what other people think discernment is. Especially, I know that everyone's different and different things work for different people. So if I see anything interesting in that tag, or if some of my acquaintances post in that tag, I'll be sure to put it in the description below. For me, discernment is composed of 3 parts: the self, intuition, and an outside source. You can define the outside source as whatever you need it to be, whether that is collective consciousness, spirit, universe, energy. I personally use spirit because I'm a medium, but you do you, no judgment. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. The reason I bring up the self is foundational. You need to know yourself so you can judge what isn't you. A big part about discernment is judgment and examining. So some of y'all may not like this, but shadow work does come into play. Understanding what causes certain reactions, what part of yourself you have left behind, and what aspects you want to bring to light. It's not just looking at the shadows. It's also bringing things to light or adding lightness to bring balance. Maybe there's something you loved to do when you were a kid, but you put it off to the side because people made fun of you. So it is bringing the good into your life as well. And another aspect of understanding the self is understanding your values, understanding what you want. What does co-creation look like to you? But also a big key part to discernment, and when you're connecting to whatever it is you want to connect to, you need to know when you're losing yourself. You need to know when you're getting out of balance. And yes, partially that does mean it's accountability, but it also means community building, so you have people to pick you up when you're not okay. And we'll get into that more later. For now, just know that it is important to build that trust with yourself and to truly understand what works for you. Next, we have intuition. For me, this was a tough one because my intuition was usually right. It did not mean I listened to it. So that's a balancing act with intuition. You can call it pattern recognition, survival instincts, the tether between you and your higher self, whatever floats your boat. But for me, it's that little gut feeling that tells you if something's right, wrong, off, authentic, inauthentic. And for me, it's usually calm or stern. It doesn't have an emotion tied to it. So that's also why it's important to understand the self, so you know when it's an emotion making the call or an emotion hijacking your system, as opposed to plain intuition and a plain download of pure knowing. Honestly, with social circumstances, it is easy to distrust the intuition because sometimes you want to make the safe decision. If you're in survival mode, you definitely want to make the safe decision. So if intuition asks you to take a risk, it's scary. So if you want to learn to better trust your intuition, what you can do, and I suck at this, so take it as you will, adapt it however you want, make a journal about every time your intuition was right. Bonus points if the logic wasn't there, but somehow the intuition was still right. And that way you can see what moments and what feelings are associated with your intuition. But also, you learn how to listen to it and how to use it more effectively so it works for you instead of working against it. Which brings me to my last point, an outside source. For me, it's spirit. I work with deities, I work with spirits, and I've learned the most from the dead. So for me, it was learning how to listen, how they showed up, when it was just the imagination, and when things actually worked out. some precautions, because we're using our discernment here. That also means critical thinking. Make sure when you're doing this process, you have multiple sources. Don't always jump on the first thing. That's where the journal comes in. You learn when you can jump off of the first thing and when you need a couple of more signs, because you can ask spirit like, hey, I hear you, but what you're saying makes no sense. So can you just give me a little more here? Or when we're talking about the concept of angel numbers, I oftentimes hear people being like, I don't understand what they're saying. I just see the number. You can co-create with your spirit team or universe or whatever what those numbers mean. When we look to mediums like Tyler Henry and Teresa Caputo, they developed languages, symbols, and systems with their team. So you have just as much power in this process. That's also why it's important to maintain your power, maintain grounding, so you don't get a little too stuck on the other side. Because side effects when you get a little too stuck on the other side, it can cause, and mind you, this is not medical advice, it can cause anxiousness, you lose trust in yourself. You may look to spirit more than you look to yourself when everything you need is within you. But obviously, when you need professionals, go to professionals. It's also important to have a therapist when you're developing your discernment, so you don't have to do your shadow work on your own, but also that's someone who's watching your patterns. They can notice when things start to get off. And for those of you that are worried about our colonialized systems, there are therapists that do understand spirituality. You just have to find the right one for you and know your rights. So when you do start listening to the other side, it helps to have friends you talk to. When I start getting a little too into the tarot cards, my friends do usually say something or they check in to make sure I'm still okay. Because I'll admit, I do kind of get stuck on the tarot cards when I really don't know how to get myself out of a problem. But ironically, the best thing that helped me connect to an outside source is understanding when to listen and understanding when to move. If you are the type to journal, a way you can pay attention to this is notice when things work out and what emotions are tied to it, and notice when things don't work out and what is tied to that. For example, for myself, when I have a bunch of luck, that's sort of my sign I'm heading in the right direction because opportunities are flowing in. But if I'm frustrated for like a month straight, I know I need to pivot and do something else. And listening to spirit does not need to be the sitting and meditation thing. I have ADHD. That does not work. So figure out what works for you. It can be a walk. I found things in books. I found things in podcasts. Once my gut told me to watch The Good Place and I got downloads from that. It's just finding your own way to listen. And to help you with that, the concept of as above, so below. So looking at what works for you in the mundane to help you build ways to listen to your connectedness. The above example is that my strongest clairs are claircognizance and clairaudience. How did I figure that out from using the mundane? Well, I figured out the best advice was when I heard something in conversation at least 3 times. When there was this hit in my gut when I heard something on a podcast. Again, the theme of hearing things. Seeing things doesn't really work for me. I'll just kind of look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty. But who knows, it might work for you. Doesn't work for me. But also there were times where I knew things. I didn't read about it. But again, double check your sources. We do got to keep things grounded in this space. Otherwise we get a little too delulu for the Solulu. But my knowing was grounded in reality. I noticed there were enough times where I just knew things and it turned out true. Or there was facts and science to back me up. Or I'll have a little gut feeling about something where I'm like, this might be a possibility, but it's only a theory for now. So we're gonna double check some sources and figure this feeling out. So again, when you're connecting to the other side, make sure you always have one foot here, that you don't lose yourself. This is how we get cults and other things. I'm also gonna re-emphasize knowing when to move and knowing when to listen, because we're in this instant gratification, moving fast society. And sometimes for myself, it's hard to gauge what is the proper pace. When I was studying things, I was shocked to find out that therapy takes at minimum like 3 months to start changes. And when you make changes, you usually should be making 1 or 2 at a time. So again, understanding the self, understanding people, understanding the world around you and the rules around you can also help you better connect and stay grounded when you're interacting with the other side. That way, you'll know if you're justified in seeking inspiration and doing research. Some art took years to research and study and go through drafts before it even made it out to public. And for some people, that's okay. But for other people, they can just go by the seam of their pants, keep moving, and their natural vibration is that divine movement. Just go from one thing to the next, and don't really pause as often. So you have to find your rhythm. I cannot tell you what your rhythm is. My rhythm is divine magnetism. I need more come to me because I'm tired. So hopefully this made sense and it wasn't too silly. Remember to stay luminary and revolutionary. We'll figure this out together, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for being here.